he's Instagramming me while he's on this chat, and he's like, "Hey, we've got like 30 people in the room right now, like, and a ton of messages on the queue. Like, I'm trying to get through them. Can you wait a minute?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, cool, whatever. Like, no big deal." So I get in there and I start listening. Were any of you in there listening on that? Like,
I wasn't there.
so somebody comes down and starts accusing him of being a pedophile. And like the room kind of blows up and it gets really crazy. And like he starts talking about some stuff he said on stereo previously that I think is probably like maybe was taken quite the wrong way, but it doesn't sound good. And so like, I'm just kind of, I message him like, dude, this is like, you can stay and like sort this out, bro. Like, you don't worry about hopping on with me. So we wound up just spur of the moment doing one on Sunday night. And you could go listen to that. It's on my, like if you searched me on there and looked at talks, it's whatever Sunday night at like 10 p.m. So we talked for like maybe an hour and a half, but it was way too much to try to cover in one talk. So we kind of plotted out we're going to do like 4 or 5 part series, every Thursday at 2 or 2:30, on there, going through this and his story and his journey. So you'll have 4 primary sources, at least.
You're saying on stereo?
On stereo, yeah.
You know what the weirdest thing was? So on Saturday, like, first I don't even know what happened, but what came on was Escaping the Cult. And it was different people's accounts of all the different cults. From starting, I think the first one was starting with Jim Jones, and then it was the Branch Davidians, and then it was the Children of God.
Yeah.
And there was like the one with like this black guy. I didn't even know there was like one in like Florida.
What, Tybo?
Yeah.
Was it Billy Blanks and Tybo? Is that cult?
No. No, I think he was like the Israelites one.
Oh, like
it's like Black Israelites. I'm like, what? Yes. And it was just like on all day, and it was very, very insightful.
This is kind of like what Farrakhan and like the Lost Foundation of Islam, like the group Malcolm X was aligned with, until he went to Africa and was like, wait a minute, that's kind of psychotic bullshit. Like what? Like that's not a good way to look at the world. And he kind of saw, the world a lot bigger, I think, after that. Because he was a criminal. He grew up and was in jail really early on. He just didn't have a very big. And groups like that prey on people that are in like desperate spots or like very black and white thinkers and kind of want somebody to take over. But he, like Dr. King, like Gandhi, all these people, by the end of their lives, the thing that they all came to realize and the conclusion they all drew was beyond race, it's economics, it's class, it's this evil imbalance of power and wealth and distribution in the world that is perpetuating racism, that's perpetuating sexism, that's like perpetuating kind of dogmatic thinking, black and white. Like, that's the bigger overlying issue than anything else. And so before he died, he had a march planned on Washington, the Poor Man's March, I think, was King's. But Malcolm X came to the same conclusion too, in that like, oh, we've got a lot more in common than we have got not in common between black and white Americans, between all Americans, between all the people in the world. Like, he had a, eye-opening kind of awakening.
That's what Jim Jones was also preaching too. That's how he got a lot of his members.
Right.
And a lot of Martin Luther's preachings were too, except he wasn't the cult.
But did a cult spring up from him? I actually gave a talk last week at Desert Christian out here on the Reformation, And
Hey, you told me about that. We were covering World War I, and I brought up how Martin Luther's 95 theses were like propaganda, or like an
yeah,
example of early propaganda.
yeah. And like anti-Semitism goes definitely all the way back to Martin Luther. Like there's a big precedent there for that, and kind of like German superiority, because Luther gets pretty poisoned by the end of his life and some of those things. Like early Luther doesn't. So I talked about that. They sent it internally into the school, but I think I'll try to post that on my YouTube page maybe, because it was like very historical. So yeah, because there's relevance for World War II, dating even all the way back to that. The
So basically, long story short, World War II was long in the making
It
before
was
even
long in the
America
making, and like
formed.
cults, Hitler, Hitler is a cult. He's a cult of personality. Like he was named Time Man of the Year. Like what? That's
They didn't see the. I guess what happened is they didn't see the atrocities he committed. They saw what he was doing for Germany and how much they did. That's what they see, but that's what people think about Hitler. Hitler, like, there's more to Hitler than just the Holocaust and
yeah.
all the death he's committed.
Well, he
Though,
just
not to
he
mention his atrocities are really terrible. They're really terrible, and I do not condone them, and I forever despise him. But the works of wonders he did for Germany before the Holocaust even occurred is pretty impeccable.
Yeah, if he would have died in
oh sorry.
1936, he'd be remembered probably as like the greatest statesman Germany ever had. Yeah, he was racist and like locked up and killed a lot of Jews and like stole stuff from people and killed homosexuals and communists and stuff.
You
But
don't
but by
sorry.
1936, he
No,
didn't do a
no.
lot of that. Like that stuff's going to start building significantly from this point. So had he died here, the Germany would be like he's the best. He was the best we ever had, because he did like the
Goes
economy,
to
the way
show
Germany
that
functioned.
some people only see the negative. They don't see like the good he's done. It's overshadowed by 6 millions he's killed.
Right, and that's what I meant kind of by like, um, like black and white. Right, we kind of hear this
He
narrative
just
that's
found the gray area. He would have
very,
been the
yeah,
greatest
very
statesman to
simple,
ever
but like,
exist.
yeah, understanding the whole thing, right? Like his speeches about kind of pulling on Germany's past and these kind of mythical explanations of things, that are rooted into all these kind of Germanic folk ideas. It's like he starts just playing, just spoon feeding them just stuff they kind of want to hear, while simultaneously taking rigid control of everything he could get hands on. Like they burnt down the Reichstag building, their parliament building. Hermann Goring, who's like going to become the head of the Luftwaffe Air Force, and is like Hitler's like longtime associate, like friend. He burnt down the Reichstag building like shortly after Hitler got elected, which gave him like kind of emergency powers, and also like totally unnormalized any of their government, because the building they did everything in was suddenly gone. Brilliant move. If you're trying to get more and more power, it's like, dang, they're pretty good at this.
They're
Like,
shooting for complete war domination,
yeah, and like
totalitarianism.
and just getting like total control. Like they wanted to get as much control over everything. That's kind of the idea of National Socialism. It's all about the nation, and society is that nation, and the social programs that go with it are only there to make the people stronger and better and better and better and better. That's why people that have like disabilities need to be like killed or all sent off in a way so we don't deal with them and it's not part of our perfect society. Like that's
Everyone
all
has a right
part
to
of.
live. That's why I love the United States as it is, because it's a mixed economy, and it's I think it's stood pretty high on what our forefathers were intending it to be.
Yeah, I think that like I don't know how much the economy has to do with that in Germany, in like economic ideals. Germany was definitely a very capitalist area, with a lot of like socialism in it. Karl Marx was German, of course, and he thought the communist revolution would happen in Germany, maybe the UK or France, possibly Italy or America. Not Russia. Like, oh my God, he would just be shocked and horrified because Russia doesn't have a history of democracy, which Marx says was essential. So you don't have an autocratic, dictatorial, maniac like Stalin take over, or Hitler in some sort of
I've
instance like
realized
this.
slowly but surely that when we think of World War II, we think of Hitler and the atrocities he's done, but we failed to look or even acknowledge that Stalin's killed 10 times more than Hitler ever did. And it was his own people.
Yeah,
The only
probably
thing we
not 10 times more, but certainly in the equivocal range. Like
more.
Stalin killed a lot of people. He killed a lot of people. So
The only thing that's different between Stalin and Hitler is Stalin was unbiased and didn't target a particular set of people like Jews, homosexuals, disability, elderly, so on and so forth.
I know that Stalin intentionally starved 6 million Ukrainians in the 20s, like, and on purpose too. So, like, yeah, kulaks.
Yeah. One of the things we're going to see here is a huge war crime where Russia essentially assassinates its hundreds of thousands of Polish prisoners of war in I think it's the Katyn forest, and like cover it up for like it's awful. Like, but Stalin was mad. I mean, he was so paranoid and crazy, and he has a mental breakdown when Hitler invades. Yeah, but speaking of that economic miracle, right? This is being America's economy and what's happening in the New Deal here with Germany. And so here you can see like some comparative numbers. So this is percentage of workers unemployed. So of the whole workforce, the world index in 1929 is 5.4. That's pretty good. In some countries like Belgium or Canada, super low. 1% in the United States. That's incredible, right? But then at the end of the kind of ride there, it's at 25%. Like that is a lot. And a lot of people put that up closer to like 30 or 35%. These are, old numbers here, but it's a royalty-free graph I could find. So even compared to a lot of other countries, the United States is like boom, hit very, very hard. Germany is higher, right? It's up there. It's worse. Austria, which is going to join with Germany, is pretty dang high too. By 19
Heard what happened in Austria this week.
No, what?
The terrorist attack.
Oh, I heard about one in France. There was one in Austria. Jeez, there's been so much news I haven't been able to keep up. What happened?
In Austria.
What's that?
I heard about it during the election coverage. A synagogue, I think, is a place of Jewish practice.
Mm-hmm.
And Austria. I don't know who did it, but a group of terrorists attacked the synagogue.
Did people die? I mean, how many people died?
Like look at it. I didn't take a look at casualties yet.
I know that a bunch of people like vandalized a Jewish cemetery a few days ago, with like MAGA stuff all over it. You got anything for us there?
It killed 4.
Ugh, jeez. Was it like it was during like
It was in Vienna.
Oh man.
Some of the suspect. Last I checked, some of the suspects are still at large, but I think 2 of them were apprehended.
Are you talking about the one that just happened this weekend?
Yeah, that happened that we covered during election day. I saw it while I was working because we have a little TV.
Didn't it happen? Oh yeah, it did happen on Tuesday. And didn't they say they shot an officer was shot?
Yeah, they attacked
Australia? An Australian?
No, Austria.
It was Austria. Okay.
It was, and they suspect it's Islamist terror.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. It did pop up on my newsfeed as well. I did hear about that.
That's horrible. Especially in Austria, it's like there is.
Austria's not swayed. They're prepped to fight with everything they got.
Well, they're
Wait, isn't that where,
they
the
have such a
governor's
history
from?
of anti-Semitism with the Nazis. It's like, oh man, you guys better get that shit together. Like that's.
Yeah,
It's
not
one
where
thing
they're
when
from.
Palestinians and Israelis are like attacking each other over like borders and like hating each other. It's another thing when like anti-Semitism starts to flare up in the country where like Hitler was born and joined forces again with Germany, just like in World War I, and totally got down with the Holocaust and everything else and the whole madness and machine. Not everybody.
Yeah,
There
when I
were
was in
resistors.
RCC, we did a specific covering. It was my AS2 year. We were writing about. We did a huge presentation, a whole section on terrorism, and we prepped like the school shootings, 9/11, terrorist attack. I think there's a few terrorist attacks in World War II in there.
Yeah.
Y'all covered the Oklahoma City bombing?
Oh
Yeah, we did that too. We did a Boston Marathon. We did
San Bernardino?
hold on, I think I might still have it. I've accessed my old freaking email from
All right. Well, let's start talking about the background of Adolf Hitler, because just kind of like, we were saying about the economy, like, oh, this is not just a black and white issue. This is like a little bit more complex. I didn't know Germany was doing that well. And so like you look at this graph right here and you can see with this world index from the right before the Great Depression hits at the end of this year, 1929, to like 1932, which is like in America, that's where Herbert Hoover gets ousted and you get a Democrat, you get Franklin Roosevelt, and like at the end of that year, beginning of the next year, and Adolf Hitler gets elected to Germany because the Nazi Party gets a technical, is it a plurality or just a majority of, like a basic majority? So it was like they had like 29% of the seats in the Reichstag, and there was like several other political parties. And so they got a big group, and because they did that, he got like, that's how he goes to power. The Nazi Party grows rapidly, and it grows really rapidly in Austria, and they try to shut it down, but they can't, because it taps into all their mythical and nationalistic ideas. So it's like very popular with people. all the Austrian people, not the not obviously not Jewish people or anybody that would be non-Austrian. But again, that's like 95, 96, 7% of the country. They're all ethnically Austrian. So when you're not the one suffering, it's really easy to just kind of turn a blind eye and say, well, that's the government. That's their job. They know what they're doing. They're paid to do that. Instead of confronting it, which is dangerous. Well, look, in Austria, you can see it's kind of like America. It goes up to like their higher unemployment, but then they also don't go quite as high with their unemployment like numbers, and then only get down to like not even quite fall numbers. So they're already high because they're suffering some of the consequences of Germany. Germany, it's even more dramatic. Austria's national bank falls first and Germany's second. But then look at this. Like, so their national bank collapses. That'd be like if the Federal Reserve went bankrupt, which I don't think is probably possible even. Based on the way it runs, it's like, well, they can just kind of print more money for themselves. It's like, I might have a misunderstanding of that, but it seems unthinkable. But their bank does, it collapses, and so this is where hyperinflation is occurring, the wheelbarrows of money, and then look, by 1937, it's down to 4.6%. Lower than in the 20s, much lower, half, and then down to 2.1%. America's still at 20% unemployment by 1938. Like, the New Deal's working a little bit, but not like a highly controlled. Look, also Japan, right? Highly controlled, rigidly controlled and structured. Everything, not just the government, like all the things, everybody's controlled. You tell people what to do and you can get really efficient, you can get great results. And this is what both of these countries are able to do that nobody else is. Like, nobody else comes close to Japan or Germany by the end of the 30s. So, yeah, wildly successful. So, how does a guy who kind of goes from that and like this super productive, successful country? Because in 1936, let me see here. I've got too much stuff in this friggin' book. This is why I like doing it on Satori too. It's actually a little bit easier to scroll through. In 1936, Germany hosted the Olympics, and there was a lot of controversy over it. People were protesting it. They were saying that we shouldn't, people knew what they were up to with the Jews. They didn't know all the details. Nobody did. A lot of people in the German government didn't. But everybody knew stuff was happening, right? Like, everybody knew people were disappearing. People were being rounded up and herded out to the frontier to support the war effort, once that is breaking out. Or to help with the Lebensspace, the living room space that Germany's trying to develop. So people knew, America knew, the Catholic Church knew in pretty specific terms. The Catholic Church has a lot of baggage. This might be one of its worst. And even with America, once we get into the war effort and begin bombing campaigns, and the British are doing bombing campaigns, they intentionally don't blow up railroad tracks to, concentration camps. They begin, reconnaissance stuff and find out about, these camps. And there's all kinds of reports of the camps. And by like 43, Russia starts taking back some land that the Germans have occupied for a few years and have built some of these temporary, Schindler's List death camps. The biggest ones being mostly in Poland, like Auschwitz and Treblinka. I've got a whole section on that. We can get to that in a minute. The point is, how do you go from that to that? And it's kind of because everybody turns a blind eye. America's in isolationism, and the countries that they're so popular with all their people, except for a handful over here. Nobody wants to bite the hand that's feeding them, and they begin realizing real quick, oh shit, there are serious repercussions for questioning authority. People know the Nazis are not up to much fun. This I don't think that was ever a impression they gave anybody. Those guys are a political party, but they're cool. They'd be fun to hang out with. No, fear is at the heart of how the machine works and operates. Same thing with Franco. Same thing with Mussolini. It's this, and sociologically, this is one of the ways you can control people, and this is a fundamental way of how a good amount of cults operate. Not all of them. There's all kinds of different cults, but a good amount of particularly the Jonestown ones, or the, Hitler, the ones that are going to end in disaster. The fear control is high. It's high, and it just kind of increases over time. It's not like the Nazis go kicking down every door and just pillaging and raping wherever they want in Germany. They just start taking over more parts of the government. The Nazi party does. And then Hitler just kind of invades Austria. But it's there's not a shot fired. The Austrian, military just kind of steps aside and lets them march straight on in. Austria's all
Bloody Sunday.
Come on. They want, because they're not as well off as Germany is, because they're not run by Germany. But that was one of the things in the Treaty of Versailles that they forbid. An Anschluss, the joining of Austria and Germany. You cannot. It's not allowed. Not because it was people were trying to enforce some subtly adjacent nationalistic racist policy. Nobody wanted that big of a country right in the middle of Europe, because they could just kind of go out, there's no buffers. That's why they created Poland. They wanted buffers between, Russia and Germany. Everybody wanted some safety space, and so they're you can't join. So by all of these different pushes and just kind of seeing that the League of Nations is just not going to respond, and countries are really not going to step up to Hitler. They really just are just desperately hoping there's not going to be another great war. And then Hitler issues an order to reoccupy former posts that they had in the Rhineland, which is the kind of industrial rich area of Germany that is close to France and I think Belgium. So they go and just kind of take that. And then they move into Czechoslovakia and take essentially like this chunk right here. But this is an European ethnic map, if you can see that. The red is German, like ethnically German people. The green's Hungarian. But look at all the German spattered in here with all the Hungarians. And over here with all the Romanians. Way over here in Transylvania. So the orange is Romanians. This over here is Italians, and that's why Italy always is trying to get this part. And the Adriatic coast right here. They always want that. Then there's the Slovenians. This is like this stuff in here. And no, this is just kind of blended in some ways. This section, if we zoomed in, is actually even more complicated with Germans even down here. And then this is Czech people in here who are not German. They're like Central European and Polish people. In Ukrainian, and look, there's German people all the way out here. So it's just kind of messy. They're mixed. They've been around for like, I don't know, hundreds of years, thousands of years. So when Hitler moves into Czechoslovakia, he comes in this way, and then after like that first grab, then he just goes straight into Czechoslovakia and joins with Austria. And this is the same time that Stalin is in the midst of his great purge. He gets Trotsky, his kind of like once ally, but now enemy because he doesn't trust anybody. So he's killing everybody. He kills... well, look at this. I've got this number here. That is 724,000 just Soviet citizens without trial or evidence or anything. They're assassinating person after person. It's all like doctors. Anybody that's got like West bourgeois views, right? So like Western medicine, Western art, any of these things, it's like, you gotta go. We can't trust you. I can't trust anybody. But it's really like anybody that has a dissenting view or alternating opinion is just a threat to like kind of absolute authority. And he was super paranoid. He was not well. He's not an okay person, like clearly. The same way Hitler was, but he was very different than Hitler. So we'll cover Stalin later, but he's doing this right now, which is going to be one of the reasons that Russia's so easy to invade quickly for Germany when they decide to just like turn and do a stab in the back on them, which is ironic because that was kind of like some of their rallying cry originally, right? They make a treaty with Stalin and say, okay, we'll just invade Poland and take it in half and we'll have a truce. And Stalin's like, oh, thank God. Nobody else would do anything with me, because he reached out to like all of the like Western countries, and I think America was willing to work with Russia, but Britain wasn't, or vice versa. something. You know, it was like there's kind of always those political rivalries. Yeah.
What happened is that there were tensions because America was going in thinking let's subdue Germany, and right, like they're thinking we have to defeat Germany and fascism. Like this is what we're here for. And Churchill was all for defeating Hitler, but fascism, right? But he also approached it from a European lens, and I learned this from Victor Davis Hanson, how he knew that once Germany fell, you empower Russia, because you know how you said about buffers, how Poland was a buffer between Germany and Russia. If Russia has Poland and even parts of Germany, it's a very, very powerful force in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So Churchill was saying, like America was saying, let's take down Hitler. If we have to make a deal with some communists, we'll do it. But Churchill was saying, okay, well, watch out. You're kind of feeding a monster here. Be careful.
Dude, yes. And Europe's kind of always been that. It's like this very delicate balancing act between all these countries. And when it starts to go tipsy-turvy, it gets really bad. Did I tell you guys about the board game Diplomacy?
I call it Risk, but yeah.
Yes, you did. And I
Risk?
forwarded that
guys-
to my friend that was on here last week, and he was definitely very interested. I think you said it's a board game or online?
Oh,
They
I think
have
what I'm talking
online
about.
versions.
I have that type of board game. Risk, what's it called? No, what did you say? Risk, right?
Oh yeah, I said Risk.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So Risk is
They
like
actually have a game that's
There's actually several variations
is
of
like
Risk. One called Axis versus Allies.
all. Yeah, it's like that.
I've never got to play that game, but I really.
I have something like that, and it was fun. It was really cool, actually. They said they actually added a dragon in the game I got.
Like 6 hours.
Who does that?
Careful.
Huh? Well, it took me through. Huh?
Okay.
It lasts like
It
6
took you
hours.
6 hours.
There is a reason I'm
It took me
pausing
3.
to do this.
It took me 3.
Okay, so
Because
I
we
know
wanna
I
rush
told
these-
you guys
rush
about
these-
this.
well, rush things.
But
Okay,
this
sorry,
is
that's all I want to say.
okay. So this is relevant for like what Noah was just talking about with like kind of this shifting balance of power. In this game, you know, I think I mentioned it maybe a few weeks back when we were talking about World War I. It's a very fun game, but it's very intense. So Risk is like world domination, and there's 7 countries, so you can play with, and 7 people or any number of people. But it's like dice rolling, and you're getting cards, and it's really based on luck, largely. But it's a strategic game, but there's a lot of luck involved. Axis and Allies, there's still a lot of luck involved because it's a lot of dice. But there's a lot more. It's much more technical. There's like navies and technological upgrades, and it's a 5-player game. You can do it with a few different combinations, like 2 versus 3, or you could do 1 versus 2, and you guys are playing kind of like double sets of countries. This game, there's no luck at all involved in it in terms of like dice throwing, and you need exactly 7 people to play. So one person is Russia right here, like if you can see where my cursor is on that screen, Russia. One person is Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire, actually, I think is what it is, in World War I as it breaks out, because it's set in 1914. Yeah, 1914, I believe. One person is Austria. So this big red thing right here is Austria, or the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austria after World War I will be much smaller. And then this kind of much different looking thing than today is what Germany is. That's another player. Italy, you guys will recognize that. It looks the same today. France and Britain. And you might be surprised to learn that like there's a kind of a handful of things that happen because it's all just writing orders and like making deals and then making secret deals with people and like trying to build alliances and then knowing when to like double turn and stab somebody in the back and go invade Russia if you're Germany, because they have this border, and this area right here is Poland. And this is what gets created after World War One. And Poland has a lot of Jewish people that live there. Ashkenazi, like European Jews. And then this is like Russia or the Soviet Union, which is going to be kind of like much more psychotic even than the Russian Empire and much more militant and aggressive and unpredictable. So like this is a fun game because you just play in rounds of like spring and fall of each year and you make moves and you don't necessarily have to invade anybody, but these little stars are the like power centers you start with. So you start with usually 2 armies and a ship. Britain has 2 ships and an army, and Russia has 2 ships and 2 armies because it's so big. They get the advantage of having a lot of one more person, which that's kind of their advantage in both wars. They just got a lot of people and a lot of land, and they're poor, but they'll just keep throwing poor people at you all day long. So they get an extra person. And Russia has 2, they have really 3 natural enemies. Germany, obviously, that could be like both people could move towards that at the same time. Turkey, because they're on, they're down here and Turkey kind of has this way to invade, or like across, the Dardanelles passage right here into this is messy, and this is like lots of hill country. So, and then the third one is Britain, because this is how they invade, and they're like always at war with the sea because Britain wants to control all of the North Sea, all of this historically, because that's what they're interested in. So like you wouldn't think that, but like Britain doesn't like Russia. They don't really care if Germany invades Russia and kills them. They're like, go for it. They're not, and like Hitler's super aggressive, but he waits to like attack England for quite a while too, because, well, the English people, they got pretty like dirty with the Romanization of a lot of Britain. But they've got that Anglo part of, Saxon, like blood that like, they're mostly Aryan. They're close enough. We'll let them in the club. But, Britain was not, they were having no part of that. Well, they were like trying to play along. And, but when Churchill got in, he's like, no. F you, man. Like we are not doing business. And like, even when the war got really bad and we started closing in, they were begging for deals, not necessarily Hitler. His like people around him were secretly trying to make all these like peace treaties. Once like Russia and the Western allies were like closing in on Germany, and it was just like, they knew it was over probably a year and a half before.
Hey, sir.
The war actually goes down.
In my analogy about the ideology and the grand economic picture, how like, yeah, and how the closing in part was like when it was all over, it was just a matter of breaking down Germany, like when they ran out of supplies, when they were incapable of deploying troops and stuff like that. So yeah, like once they were surrounded and everyone was mobilizing, I mean, they put up a fight obviously, but it was just like a guy pinned in the corner just being beat up over and over again. They just couldn't take the hit.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very fun game to play, but it's like 6 or 7 hours to play it, and it's only 7 people, and it's like, it takes a while to get eliminated. Like you can't just like get eliminated in one shot because somebody rolled a ton of lucky really dice against you. you'll be in the game for a while, no matter what, and then you kind of have to make alliances to survive, and you have to get people to like support your army to invade somebody else, and then you give them a favor, and it's like, well, this is kind of actually how a lot of this works in real life. It's like one of the highest rated board games of all time. So when COVID is over or we have vaccines or something, I want to do an in-person game of this. And it's usually pretty hard to find 7 people that are down for like an entire day board game. Like, that's pretty intense for a lot of people. But for those of us that sounds really fun, it is really fun. And I'm like, I'm down. I could play. Like, it's very fun to play if it sounds fun to you. But if an 8-hour board game sounds horrible to you, it would be horrible. So
I played a role playing game that's more than 8 hours, so I could live with it.
yeah, and to a degree, there's actually kind of like an element of role play and intrigue. It's
Sounds
all
really fun.
interactive. You're just talking to people and like making deals and trying to like think through what somebody else might do and where you're kind of vulnerable. So yeah, if you guys are interested, you can just email me. I should probably start putting together a list because I've played it. I have the game. I've played it. I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 times, but like over like, I don't know, 15 years. It's just like every now and then I can get together to play an 8-hour game, but when we can, I'm going to put one together, and I've got a few people that want to do that. So if you want to be one more person, let me know. All right. Okay.
Hey, sir, class is almost over. Can I ask you a question about the project real quick?
Let me wrap up Hitler here,
Sure.
and then we can talk projects for a while. I'll end the recording then, and I'll start a new one for recording more stuff about the projects. Okay. Appeasement. This is the word, and Neville Chamberlain. He's the Prime Minister of England, and he goes over to meet Hitler and has the like famous meeting with him where Hitler's like, I'm not going to take any more land. Listen, man, I promise. We just feel like we want to let German people live in Germany. Don't worry. We're not going to do any more. Like, he didn't wink, but Neville Chamberlain was probably a fool to believe him, but was hoping to see that. And Hitler offered that bold-faced lie, and then takes the rest of Czechoslovakia shortly thereafter, and then is kind of primed to move into Poland, move into the Ukraine, move into Russia, and they do.
Armenia.
They start doing that, and that's kind of the end of their ability to really keep control of the situation. They're like, we just keep #winning, like, because they shock people. It's like, oh damn it, nobody thought somebody would actually just go do that. Like, all right, well, what do we do now? He's got an air force.
We continue to freaking appease him.
Yeah.
Basically happens.
And it's like we really have to remember people were just desperately hoping to not have another one of these wars, and the re-flare of it, or the like breaking of the armistice, is so much worse than the first one in terms of like deaths and catastrophes and horrific,
Heard one of the chemical weapons that Japan was going to be using biological weapons for Manchuria and stuff. They use plague.
Oh yeah, that's right. And I think early on, yeah, they did, there was messed up stuff. I think they broke some dams on the Yellow River, the Yangtze River, and like flooded.
which gave off a whole bunch of yellow fever.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's right. It flooded it killed like a lot of people, and like made swamps and stuff and yellow fever, and yeah,
Which led the Americans to say to put serious trade sanctions on them, and
Yeah.
then Japan didn't really like that very much, and then proceeded.
yeah. I think in the following week we'll try to do kind of a four-parter looking at the just kind of military overflow of the war, like what happened, like what countries were where and a part of what. And then we'll look at the Holocaust specifically because it's one of the kind of like, how do I wrap my mind around
Key
that
points.
thing? Yeah, and it's like, even when we try to cover it in history class, it's so complicated, complex, overwhelming, and just kind of unthinkable. It's like, I can't even really imagine 6 million people.
Apocalyptic.
Like I know the number 6 million people is astonishing, but like I can imagine 100,000 people. I can imagine Woodstock. What was that, like 500,000 people, 400,000 people?
Yeah, Auschwitz was the biggest camp,
Yeah, I can't imagine.
along with Buchenwald and others.
I can't imagine that because it's such a large number. It's like that's crazy, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that like Holocaust denial's on the rise.
Camp department either.
What's that?
Even though they didn't do the United States actually had some camps of our own. Manzanar.
Oh yeah. We'll get to that. So like, we'll do military. We'll do Holocaust. We'll do kind of like the change of America through the war, and then the atomic bomb. You know, death of Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, atomic bomb, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, American victory, Cold War, bang. Like it's like we'll go boom and just end that, and we're straight into the Cold War. Most people kind of stretch it out, and it's like no, it was starting before the end of the war. It started when Harry Truman got,
Yeah, and
got promoted because Franklin Roosevelt had a stroke or cerebral hemorrhage.
yeah, when I was in U.S. history in high school, we read an article that gives us two opinions of the nuclear bombs. One of them being nuclear bomb being victory, which is the American view, and the other one of Japanese view, nuclear bombs, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, victimization.
Yeah, and that's why I think we're gonna have to do like not 4 nights, like 4. I'll try to I might pre-record one of them. I might pre-record the Holocaust one as I kind of rearrange some of this stuff and put it in. And then maybe do like 45 minutes, 45 minutes, 45 minutes. And that 45 minutes is just a setup for the Cold War. We're not going to talk about the Cold War in that one. It's like the atomic bomb and this kind of epic change in things. And then like what happens after there could have been world peace. Something else happens. And so like that's all that and the Holocaust, and then really like what America and therefore the world was really like before World War II is, those things are so much to wrap our minds around. And then we talk about the atomic bomb, and it's like, oh my gosh, okay, so Like, that's why so many things happen here. It's like, all right, if we really unpack these, in some ways, the 50s and 60s will actually go faster. But there's just so much that happens here in this kind of 9-10 year window that it takes. I find I just can't go faster through it without being. I feel like irresponsible in some ways because I'm like, okay, I want you to know about the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and understand the Vietnam War and all these things. But if you don't understand World War II, it's not going to matter. Like, you'll never understand Vietnam if you don't understand World War II. You won't understand the Cold War, any of those things. And including, like, you won't understand some of the, like, socio psychological things that have happened to us as we live with the realizations of things like the Holocaust and nuclear attacks on people and a nuclear arms race and like, oh yeah, all of those things have drastically changed how Americans just are or think about things, even if it's all just subconscious. And I think that's all of those things being wrapped up in this big, giant, very complex event make it why we're like, okay, let's just watch black and white footage on the History Channel of why Hitler was in the occult or why Hitler was an alien. That sounds like what it would be on the History Channel. Why Hitler was an alien and, you know, his children were lizard people. All right. It's 9:03. I think.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, so for sure, like next Wednesday, we ain't gonna have no class because of Veterans Day, or what? How do we do that?
Oh, yeah. It is Veterans Day.
My sister's birthday is Veterans Day.
Oh, well, tell her happy birthday.
Okay, here's what I will do. I
Move it to Thursday.
No. You guys can have the week off, and I think I've got to talk to my wife first, actually. I'll talk to her, but I'm assuming class is canceled just on the school schedule. So, yeah, you guys can have it off. But if it works out, I might try to do like Forrest Gump that evening, like the Forrest Gump discussion, like with the movie. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We're gonna
When are
watch
we
that
watching the
together
movie?
over Zoom.
Yeah, I
watching them?
thought I could probably do it that way. And I'm like on my camera right now, but I can do a projection. I think that's pretty high quality into Zoom, so you could just leave it open on your computer or phone or whatever. It's
So when will
it's a
this
great
happen?
movie. I'm thinking about next Wednesday. I was thinking of maybe trying to do it over the weekend, but I don't think I should do that
Do it on
over this
Wednesday.
weekend. I think maybe next Wednesday, maybe even later in the evening, like starting the discussion around 8 or something like that. And so I don't know.
Yeah,
Like I
that's
said, I got to
perfect.
talk to my wife.
Are you gonna do the whole vote thing that we did for the last one?